I wanted to expand my quilting skills by making a project that included blocks that were set on point. I didn't want to make a full-size quilt, so I designed a bed runner project. And in this project, I expanded my skills by learning how to place these blocks on point. I've completed 5 9-inch blocks to be included in my bed runner project. As you see here, I preliminarily set them on point. I have hardwood floors, and so I used the panels here to line up the blocks so that I can have an idea of what it's going to look like once I sew them on point. Here I have the bed runner with all 5 finished blocks, and I also have the setting triangles that have been cut using the AccuQuilt Go Big cutter and the 9-inch finishing triangles or setting triangles die. I absolutely despise using a rotary cutter. I'm not good at it. I don't like it. It stresses me out. So I take the easy route and use the AccuQuilt system. And so what you see here are 2 4 corner triangles and then 2 4 6 8 center setting triangles. I'm going to sew these together and show you what the finished product looks like. I've completed sewing the quilt blocks to the finishing triangles, and now what I have here are 1 2 3 4 5 segments of this bed runner, and each segment includes setting triangles and a quilt block on point. The next step is to sew all these segments, the 5 segments, together to complete the bed runner top. Ta-da! Here is the 5 9-inch blocks that have been set on point. They are all sewn together with the finishing triangles and corners. Now here's the tricky part. I only have this much fabric left over to complete a border and probably a mixed piece binding to complete this bed runner. I have no idea how this is all going to turn out, so make sure you stay tuned because it'll be a surprise to all of us. I decided to audition the 3 primary colors as a border because I'm not really sure how it's going to look. And so here is the orange potential border. Option number 2 is this teal colored border. Here is option number 3, which is this, I don't know, chartreuse color. And what I'm noticing is that each of the 3 colors is giving me a certain kind of vibe or certain type of energy. So I guess I need to determine like what energy I want this bed runner to have. Comment down below and let me know your thoughts on whether you would pick option 1, 2, or 3, and then let me know why, because I really don't know what I'm gonna do. I am going to take a break, have a little snack, think this through, and then get back to you guys. So make sure you stay tuned. I've made an executive decision. I decided that I wanted to have the larger border to feel a little cooler, a little calmer to me. So I selected this green chartreuse color for the primary first border. Then I realized I did not have enough fabric to complete a solid color of a binding. So I said, let me audition these 2 remaining colors to see if it would potentially look okay, because I wanted to pull all 3 main colors into this bed runner. So this is what I came up with. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this color and make that the primary border, and then I'm going to cut the remaining 2 colors here and piece them together so that the binding will be 2 colors instead of 1. I don't know. What do you guys think? Do you think this is going to be a hot mess or not? I have no idea, but I'm going to go ahead and keep moving forward. So make sure you continue to stay tuned so you can see how this all turns out. Mission accomplished. I've sewn on a 3-inch border to this bed runner, and it completes at 67 inches wide by 16 inches high. My next steps are to add the batting, the backing, quilted and then add the binding. As you guys know, I'm going to use a pieced binding that includes the other two colors in this bed runner, but the backing is a bit of the mystery because I didn't plan for that part, so I have no idea what it's gonna look like. I am about to go into my scraps and pull out some pieces and see what we come up with. So make sure you stay tuned to see the next step in this project, and comment down below and tell me what you guys think. Let me show you a little closer what this looks like. See you in the next segment. At this point in the project, I am going to break several rules in quilting. So if you are part of the quilting police squad or you are a perfectionist, you may want to close your eyes for this part because I am gonna do something that's gonna make your blood curdle. I am using a backing that totally is not any color in this quilt top. It's not even quilting cotton. It's like a upholstery fabric that I had in my stash. And so this project is for me. I started this project to build my own skills around sewing blocks that have points, as well as putting a block on point. So this project was a learning for myself, and at this point I just want to get it done so that I can move on to the next project. So I am going to use this backing that is lavender. I'm using traditional quilting cotton, and I have my quilt top. But the tricky part, or the genius part of my quilting process, is that this backing is double-sided fusible, y'all. I'm not sure if you're aware, but I sew with vintage sewing machines, and yeah, they don't have walking feet. They're non-computerized and they're barely motorized. So I don't have the luxury of like a walking foot. So I had to figure this out, and one of the hacks I found was to use double-sided fusible batting. So I am going to complete that process now and then show you how I finish up this sandwich, and then we're going to put the binding on. We've entered the home stretch in completing this bed runner project. I've taken the quilt top, the cotton batting, and the linen backing, used my embroidery machine to quilt it, and I serged the edges. And let me give you a close-up of what's happening here. Okay, I cheated a little bit. I used my embroidery machine to essentially quilt the 3 layers of this quilt sandwich together. And I just used a simple swirl design. And remember earlier when I showed you that random lavender fabric? Well, here it is. And as you can see, when the bed runner is flat, you don't really see the backing anyway, but let me show you what I did to the edges. So I like to use my serger to basically give me a straight edge of my backing, my batting, and my quilt top. And so the reason why I do that is because when I attach my binding, everything is already straight, and it makes it a whole lot easier for me to attach the binding, which, by the way, is my least favorite part of completing a project. So let me show you how I do that next. Let's talk about binding. I took the orange color and the teal color fabric. I used my AccuQuilt cutter and the 2 1/4 inch die to cut these strips of fabric. I particularly prefer the 2 1/4 inch versus the 2 1/2 inch, just because I find the 2 1/2 inch gives me too much fabric to fold over. And so again, binding is my least favorite part of making a project. So I try to make it as simple and easy for me as possible. So what I did was I pre-cut these into, I guess these are approximately 18 inches. And as you can see here, I alternated the colors, and then I have this cute little, I call it like a bindy gadget, and you just basically roll your binding fabric on here like such. And what it does is it keeps your binding nice and organized. So as you start sewing, the binding basically spools off the gadget like this, and so it makes it much easier. Now, what I'm going to do now is show you how I attach the binding to the quilt sandwich. So what you see here is my completed quilt sandwich. I have my quilt top. Inside I have 100% cotton batting, and on the back I used this linen upholstery fabric. What I've done is I've serged the edge of my quilt sandwich, and the reason why I like to serge the edges is because it gives me a clean straight line to attach my binding to, and also what it does is it ensures that all 3 layers of my quilt sandwich gets wrapped into the binding process. Sometimes what happens is I found that when I wasn't serging the edge, I would attach the binding from the back, flip it over, sew it, and then realize like, holy heck, like a part, like the quilt top didn't get stitched in, and I would be so frustrated. So I'm blessed enough to have a serger. So I just serged it. It gave me a nice clean edge, and watch how that works. So this is the back of the quilt sandwich. I basically take my binding and I take this side, which is the folded side. I take this side of the binding, which is the folded side. I attach it to the edge of the serged quilt sandwich like this. I take a pin and I pin it, and then I'm going to use Juan Pablo to attach this binding. So what you're going to see is I'm going to sew a 1/4 inch seam along the edge of this binding, or along the edge of the sandwich. And then what's going to happen is I'm going to flip it over and show you how I complete the process. So here we go. I am breaking rules again. I am using a 75-year-old Singer 201-2 sewing machine. This sewing machine does not have a walking foot. It doesn't come with walking feet. They didn't make walking feet for this machine. I've tried to use aftermarket walking feet to attach to this machine, and it was a hot mess. So I just said, forget it. My goal in making quilted projects is getting them done. It is not perfection. So what I decided to do that works well for this 75-year-old sewing machine is I attached the traditional 1/4 inch foot to this machine. This Singer 201-2 is extremely powerful. Like, this motor is a beast. So because the motor is so powerful, another benefit of having serged edges on my quilt sandwich is that as this quilt sandwich hits the feed dogs here and goes under the presser foot and sews through, because the sandwich is serged, I don't have to worry about the quilt top or the batting or anything sort of dragging. So this sandwich will pull together in unison versus pieces of the sandwich getting mixed up as it goes through the presser foot and underneath the needle. So the main point of using a walking foot is to make sure that all 3 layers of your quilt sandwich go through evenly and consistently. When you serge your quilt sandwich, it minimizes the delay in making sure all 3 layers go together evenly. I know that's a lot of words, but let me just show you. So because it's thick, I kind of have to put it under to get it started. So as you can see here, I have a pin. I am not going to sew over this pin, don't you worry. Okay, so once I get a couple of stitches in, I like to back stitch. Okay, so now there are stitches there, it's attached. I pull out my pin, and what I'm doing is I'm holding the sandwich here. I have my binding. I'm holding the sandwich at this point. I have the binding here. And as you guys know, this bed runner is 67 inches long by 16 inches wide. So right now I'm sewing the long end. So I'm holding it further down to make sure it feeds in straight. So here we go. Look at Juan Pablo go. And every now and again, I just kind of stop to make sure, you know, everything is still straight. I'm using my left hand to sort of make sure everything stays stable. And I just sew it through. As you can see here is my 1/4 inch seam that I use to attach the binding on the back side of my quilt sandwich. So I am going to break more rules in quilting. So if you are part of the quilting police or you are a perfectionist, you are not going to want to see what I'm about to do. But if you're a quilter who wants to just get your project done and of course make it look nice but not be so perfect, then stay tuned. What I do is flip over the sandwich with the binding as such, and I pull the binding down or towards me and I give it a finger press. Then I take my steam fast iron with no steam and I give it a press like that. And that kind of flattens it out. And I just put the clapper on for a second and take it off. Now here is something that I found is the best hack ever. I use a product called Roxanne Glue Basted. And it's basically like Elmer's glue, but it's for fabric. So breaking a rule again, what I do is I apply some glue right on top of my serged seam as such, just, you know, a little bit like that, right? And then I fold it over and give it a little press. And, you know, yeah, it spills out, but it's washable and it'll wash out. And then here is where I really break a rule. I take my steam fast iron again and I just give it a little press. And what that does is it helps it stick and dry a little faster. And then I take my clapper and like put it on really fast so that the glue adheres. And I'm actually pressing on it right now instead of just letting it lie flat. And I take it off. And so what it does is it prevents me from adding so many pins in this area when I go to my sewing machine. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to finish this process for the remainder of this quilt. And then by the time I move along the binded edge and let this sit, this will be dry. Then I'm going to take it over to Juan Pablo and I'm going to sew 1/8 of an inch right there. And then my project will be complete. So stay tuned so you can see that part of the process. I've used Roxanne Glue Basted, my steam fast iron without any water, and my clapper to press the binding to the front of my quilt sandwich. You can see here that I have the beginnings of a mitered corner so that I can sew this down. So the reason why, again, I like to use the Roxanne Glue Basted is it pretty much eliminates the need for pins. As you can see here, this is on here's good enough for me to start stitching. So I am going to show you how. Now, a little frustrated with this. My corner isn't mitered as well as I'd like it to be, but look, done is better than perfect. So I'm going to show you how I stitch down the binding so that it stays, and then I will show you the finished project at the end. This is the finished project. It is 67 inches wide by 16 inches high. This is on a queen size mattress, and as you can see, it fits pretty well. I was concerned about it being too short or too high or whatnot, but it looks good. So let me point out some of the elements and some of the skills I learned while completing this project. Number one, I used alternating color binding fabric all the way around this project. Number two, I set the blocks on point. And as you can see here, let me show you, this is the way, well, let me use this block. If it weren't set on point, it would look like this. But since I set it on point, this is the finished look. I used the AccuQuilt cutting system and the 9-inch finishing triangles to cut out the squares here to set them on point, or the triangles, I should say, to set them on point. I used my embroidery machine to create the quilting. It's kind of hard to see in this light, but as you can see, there's kind of like a loose swirl. And let's see what else is in there. I think that's pretty much it. I learned a lot during this project. I learned that I should make sure that I think about the backing, guys. Yes, this is that lavender backing that I use that is upholstery fabric. And so one of the lessons I learned with this project is to think through the completion of the project so that I can plan for the backing. But you can see a little bit of the quilting here. And again, I use my embroidery machine to quilt the sandwich together. It doesn't look so bad from the front. This is a project that I made for myself just to improve some of my skills. So I'm not too upset about it being mismatched on the back. One skill that I need to improve on for my next project, and I hope you guys stick with me, is that my corners look just okay. I mean, I didn't do them as well as I would like to, but it's a new skill for me, so I have to work on that. The other thing is, I don't know if you guys noticed when I started adding the binding, I made one of the cardinal mistakes. And I know that I was saying I was breaking some rules, but that rule I was not intending on breaking. So if you caught it, comment down below and let me know that you saw what I did wrong at the beginning of adding the binding onto this project. That's all for now. Thank you for joining me. Stay tuned for my future videos.